Hi there, welcome to this video explaining some basic tips on running virtual training courses. In this video I'm going to walk through some of the logistics involved in running our Design Thinking 101 course, and hopefully this can help you whether you're running that course or if you're running some other courses. So I'm going to be using as a basis this planning document, the production plan for our virtual Design Thinking 101. This document is available to people teaching the course, but I will speak to the contents as we go through. It's about 15 or 16 pages, and we're just going to walk through this, and I'm going to elaborate on some of the content. So if you've got the document, here's sort of the director's notes with it. First of all, the cover has an overview of the different sections. So this is a good preview of what we're going to talk about. And these sections should be visible along the bottom of this video in YouTube because we'll make these different chapters within the video. So the first part is the planning and scheduling. When you decide that you're going to teach a class, how do you get the things set up that you need to so that you have the placeholder for the class? So that'll be first. And then a little bit about the communications leading up to the course. And then the prep work, both the digital prep work within Mural, which is our online whiteboarding tool for this class, as well as some of the physical setup, some of the physical things you need to have in place to teach the class. Finally, we'll talk about, not finally, but next we'll talk about the studio setup, by which I mean your computers and what kind of things you need to have on your computer so that when you push go, you're ready for things to start. I'll talk about sort of the readiness check with the AV check to make sure that before you sort of open the doors that everything's working properly. And then what you do in that time between, like the hour before the class, when you've logically opened the doors and anyone could be coming in, but you're kind of making sure that things are ready to go. Then the last three things are, what do you do during the session itself, not including things like present, but also some of the logistics of the activities. Not the activities themselves. I'll put a link later to the actual activities we use in this class, but some of the logistics that you need to help support those activities. We'll talk about the things you do between the sessions, because this class is a one-day class that's been split into two separate classes, and so we have an afternoon in between. And we'll talk about that stuff that you do between the classes. And finally, some of the stuff that you do afterwards, some of the post-class communication. So that'll be the content. And let's jump right in to the first part, which is the planning and scheduling of the course. So planning and scheduling. I've got three sections here. Things you do in Outlook, things you do in the learning system, be it EventX or Career Connect, which are the ones that we use. And finally, the links that you set up, the short name redirectors into the class material. So let's start with Outlook. It's really Outlook/Zoom. The first item says to schedule a recurring call. This is a recurring Zoom call. So you can go into Outlook and using the plugin, when you say I want to schedule a call, you can schedule one for that recurs for 2 days so that you'll have the same entry and the same Zoom login information, the same Zoom meeting ID for both the first day and the second day, which helps. And I schedule them to start 1 hour before, which means people can come in up to an hour before, and to last a half hour later. So if it's an 8 to 12 class, the actual Outlook and Zoom meeting will be from 7 to 12:30. A 9 to 1 becomes 8 to 1:30. Additionally, I block some other time on my calendar. I block the afternoon in between because after I get done with the morning session, there's work to be done in the afternoon, which we will cover. Also, the day before, I want to block at least half the day to run through things to allow time for some of the pre-work and checks. And if something comes up that I need to go and get, I have the time to do that. So I want to block at least half the day before. I also block personal calendars, especially in this time of COVID that we're in right now. This is November 2020. There may be other things going on. You might have doctor's visits or parent-teacher conferences that you need to attend. And so just because something's blocked on my work calendar doesn't mean that my family knows about it. And if it's time that I really am not flexible on, which I'm not if I'm teaching the class, I need to make sure it's reflected in my personal calendars. This is my reminder to put it in my personal calendar as well. So that's Outlook /Zoom. The next part is EventX/Career Connect. It's just creating the class entry. We use EventX for our dry runs and sort of less formal things that we're just going to send out to them and they show up. But for sessions where it's like an open session and as part of our learning program, we would use our corporate learning system so that people can find it the way they would expect to and track the attendance more easily. And you can contact the normal people who will help you set that up. You don't necessarily have to do it yourself, but you'll need to make sure that it gets done. So please ask for that. Also in the description, because this is not a one-day course anymore, it's a 2-day course, we would need to reflect in the body of the text that attendance on both days is required. So it's not either or, it's both. The last part, take this video off. The last part of this is the go-to link. So the go-to link is a short, a URL shortener so that you can type in a memorable and short URL into your Chrome or Edge browser without having to remember the entire URL of your mural board. So those need to get set up. You'll need to have the boards created first. So that's covered elsewhere in one of the videos on managing mural. I'll maybe throw the link up here, maybe throw it up there, on how to facilitate and administer mural. So you'll need to have the mural boards created. Once you've got those boards and the URLs of each of the boards, then you go into the go-to system and create links for them and just copy those URLs into a text file so that you have them later to distribute. And you may want the person who's creating the mural boards to also create the go-to links just so they're not having to handle stuff back and forth. It just makes things easier. So that is the sort of planning and scheduling of the course. So next I'm going to talk about section 2, which is communications. And I have two items listed here. First is announcing things. So Yammer, for example, is one platform that we would use to announce a new class. So if there are ways of advertising your session, you want to remember to engage the people and the channels to let others know that the class is coming. So that's one, just make sure you advertise the course availability. And then in Outlook, which is the mail system that we're using, we would send out communications in the week to go. So we'd have a week to go email reminding people of basic expectations. Included in that email, and this is something that's perhaps a little bit different, is going to be a pre-session, pre-class activity. So some pre-work before the class, which just consists of logging into the system so we can flush out any technical issues with getting into the system. So log into the system, create a Post-it note, put your name on it, and then drag that to a table. This allows us to sort of see to not only test the technology, and if people have any issues or questions, for them to bring them to us ahead of time so we can work them and not waste other people's time. It also gives us a bit of a sense of who's really going to show up. Because if people have done the work to bother to put that there's a good chance they're going to show up, I would suspect. Whereas if some people maybe signed up but they haven't done anything, we can chase them a day or two before and maybe they'll say, oh yeah, I'm actually not really going to be able to attend. So we can have better awareness coming in as to the size of the class. In that email where we say, here's your pre-work, we also attach links both to how to do the pre-work. So we have a video for the pre-work, which is a mural participant pre-work video, as well as because the class takes place over Zoom, we have links to several videos on Zoom, which is now familiar to many people. But wasn't back at the beginning of the year. And there's certain features like how you get the lighting set up well, or how to use breakout rooms, for example, or different ways to lay out your screens that may not be familiar to many participants. And so we include all those links and just say, we expect you to be able to see you and hear some information to help you be prepared and get the most out of the session. So we'll send that out to people. I also mentioned in the planning document that you might want to consider creating an Outlook contact group. I created one and didn't really use it. I don't know if it's necessarily useful, but if you think that you might be sending stuff via email during the class, rather than having to take the time to go look up each name and resolve it, you could just create a contact group for your class, put everyone in that, and then if you need to send something, for example, the post-class email or other things, you've got the group already set up and you can do that quickly if there's some problem that comes up. So that's something you might want to think about doing, but it's not required. That was pretty straightforward. Now on to section 3, which is digital preparation. So we're going to talk about how to set up the mural boards and then how to set up your physical environment. Now, some of this section about digital preparation is actually covered in the mural video that if I didn't link it earlier, I'm going to link it here now, that talks about how to facilitate sessions in mural as well as how to build boards and how to administer them and do change control, etc. So some of that material explains some of the content in the document, and I won't go over all of that again because it's shown with examples. So the first part that applies to the change control. So when you have a new class, first of all, importantly, if you have a new class you're going to teach and you want to have the mural board set up, recognize you probably don't have to do this yourself. You're probably going to ask someone to do it, and it may be me or someone following in my role. So that's fine. So what I'm going to talk about here, some of this is what somebody needs to do, but it's not necessarily you. Nevertheless, when you have a new class, you need a new set of boards. We create new boards for each class, new mural whiteboards. And so the old boards need to be deleted or set into the old class sort of archive in case there's data there that we want to use before we delete them. So the old stuff has to be cleared out, and then we create new ones, not from scratch, but we have a reference sort of gold copy, the reference copy that's in backup, and we take that backup and we stamp out a clean new set of boards. So someone's going to do that for you. And when that's done, the URL of all of those new boards is going to be different, which means any links that exist, and there are lots of them, all need to go and be updated. For example, we have a main board, and it has links to all the other boards, and you click on them, it jumps you into the new board. Well, that new board has a URL, and all of the other ones do as well. So all those new links have to go into the new board, etc. So you have to create the new boards, you have to get the links to the new boards, you have to enable them to be shared, and then you have to go update them in various places. So that's stuff that needs to be done. I also mentioned in the document it says update go-to links. Again, go-to is the friendly URL shortener, and if those links if you're reusing links that have already existed, maybe these are brand new, but if you're reusing links that have already existed, somebody owns them, that's the person who's going to need to do the update. So if you're lucky, the person who's just created these new boards also owns the go-to links, and you just go and paste them in and hit update and you're done. If not, then you have to pass that information around and make sure that there's no errors made. So again, I'd encourage you to have the person who owns the go-to links also be the person who's managing the mural boards. Probably make your life easier. And again, that might be me. And then just test these. After you've set them up, you want to just test everything. The next item towards the bottom says prepare content. You should not need to do this. It says prepare content, reset any changes. In theory, there should not be any changes because you deleted all your old stuff, and you took your known good reference and made a copy. So this should be good. You shouldn't need to make any changes in theory. In practice, there may be something that you've decided you want to do different. It may be that you had something, visibility turned on or off, do a screenshot of something, and this is really a placeholder in the instructions to say, look at everything and make sure everything is the way it should be. And if something was changed, and visibility is a good example, like maybe you hide or show something to take a screenshot. It may be that you've got one storyboard that's visible and it should or should not be, right? So you want to figure out how that should be. You just check everything. Make sure that if there is any change that was made to it, that it's clean. So it's just a double check. And also the last item says optional as well. Trim the gallery and the main murals for fewer tables. I also mentioned trimming the murals in the change control video that I mentioned to you a moment ago, the facilitating with mural video. Here's how this is going to work in practice. Let's say you open up a session, you've got enough space for 8 teams. That's the high end of what we're designing for. And a few days before, you think you've got enough people for 4 teams or maybe 5. You might not want to have enough stuff on these whiteboards for 8 teams if you only have half that many people here. It's just a lot of distraction, and when people start filling things in, it looks half empty. It's like having a room with twice as many chairs as people. It just kind of feels a bit lonely. So typically in a physical room, we would not put up flip charts and things on the wall and set tables if we didn't think we'd have enough people for that. We might have one extra table, one extra space in case maybe someone shows up we weren't expecting, but not a lot extra. And so trimming to me is just this process of going back and deleting out things that it turns out you don't need. You might do that by making a copy of the board and then deleting stuff from the copy. Recognize when you make a copy, you've now got new URLs. So that's a complication. You also may have to unlock things. You can delete things even if they're locked in the board. But if you've put a bunch of things together and grouped them and moved them over, and now you want to delete things from the group, you may have to ungroup it, which might mean you have to unlock it. So deleting things out isn't as simple as saying push a button and delete out table number 8, table number 7. You've actually got to go in and make changes. This is also the kind of thing that you might say, you know, Jeff, can you give us just 5 tables instead of 8? Because you need to be careful doing it. You've got to decide if it's worth the trouble. The last time I did a session, I did, in fact, take it from 8 tables down to 5 because I thought it was worth the trouble. But it was trouble. But it was worth it in my case. So this is just a reminder that if you think you have way too many tables, you can trim them down. I would leave 1 extra because maybe you have a little bit more than you think, perhaps, which is the expected participants divided by 4, which is the expected teams, basically, plus 1. But make sure that everything links back up when you're done. Okay. There's also one thing I put in here that I wanted to elaborate. So about halfway down the page, it says, need to decide who owns the go-to links, as probably they will be the only people who can update it. Note that this requires the use of our company machine, else the links break. I think the main thing is that if you have, with your links, if you are on an external machine, you would be unable to make changes. If you're on a machine that is not on the company network, you would not be able to make changes. In many cases, you would not be able to make changes to internal redirectors. And so just be aware that if you're doing that work, you need to be on the right kind of machine for it, I think is what I mean there. Okay, so that's the mural preparation. I'll say a little bit more about mural later as well. On to section 4, physical preparation. This part's relatively straightforward. The next part is relatively complicated. But this is the simple part, which is what are the physical things you need to make sure you have. I would typically check this a day before, maybe 2 days before, because if I don't have it and have to print, maybe I'm out of paper, I have to go get some paper, so I want to allow a little bit of time, but don't need too much, compared to in person where you're bringing a lot of new kit with you. So print, there's a script, as you'll probably be aware, there's a script to the class, so I want to print out the current version of that script, so I've got a fresh copy. I want a copy of this document, of the actual production plan. I could be doing this on computer, but on the day when I have my checklist of things to do on the morning and in the hour before, I want to have a physical copy because my screens are already spoken for. I've got things in specific places where I want them to be. I don't want to be trying to look up this document. So I print out a copy of this document. I have the choreography document, which I don't know if I have one handy here. That's just the timing sheet. So it has the expected timestamps of things that happen during the class where the presenter is not on stage. That could be a break. It could be an activity where the focus is on the activity that's happening. It could be a video that's playing. In each case, I don't have to have my attention on the participants. I can actually look over and see what time it is and write that time down next to the expected time to see if I'm ahead or behind. So I want a print copy of that that's up to date. And finally, there's something called the team grid, which is new and will be unfamiliar to most people watching this video. It's called, team grid is a fancy name. It was originally a Post-it note. All it is a list of each team, be it team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, or it could be, team Paris, team KL, team Dubai. But the name of the team, and underneath it, the 3 or 4 participants that are expected. And because our pre-work activity has people joining teams and tables, we kind of know what that's expected to be. So I want to make sure I have this. It's a template, it's a PDF, and it just has blanks for team name, player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, just 4 blanks. And what I can do is, and you'll see this later, is that as people come in, I can write down who's on what team on a physical document, again, so that as I need to know that information, I don't have to go hunting for it on a computer. When I've got lots of things on my computer, I can just pick up the sheet of paper and I know who's supposed to be on this team. There are a few ways in which that's actually really useful, and since I don't know that it comes up later, I'll mention it here, and if it comes up later, I'll just refer to this. So why it's useful to know who's on what team, there are 3 places where that's helpful. One is that we are going to build breakout rooms in Zoom, and those breakout rooms will match the table. So if I know who the people are on that breakout room and I've got it written down, as people are joining the call, I can just look at that sheet of paper and say, okay, Carlos just joined the call, and I know Carlos is on Team Dubai, so I can just put him directly in, and again, I don't have to go looking for it. So that's one. Another thing is if somebody drops out of the call, maybe you put everyone in their Zoom breakout rooms, and that doesn't mean that they're in the breakout room, but they've been associated with that room. So everyone has their team membership in Zoom, essentially. What having it written down helps you to do is if someone has to drop off a call, either expectedly or unexpectedly due to a technical issue, maybe they're in a breakout room and or teams are out in their breakout rooms and having a conversation. Someone drops off, they come back into the main call. You've got to put them back in the right team pretty quickly. You don't want to go hunting around in the mural board to find that. So you can say, oh, Carlos, welcome back. Oh, yeah, you're in Dubai. Let me add you in. So that can be helpful. The third place where it's helpful is there are activities where we actually swap. Maybe there's four things. There's activities where we swap people between teams. And so by seeing who's in different teams, I can sort of say, okay, I have explainers for this team, this team, this team. Could I have somebody for, Team Paris? And I can see a name come in, I can cross-check it and make sure that it's someone who's on that team. So I can make sure that I've got all my explainers, so I can swap them between groups and swap them back, and I've got that all written down in front of me. And finally, the last thing is there are certain places where I might want to call on someone from a team. We've done a yes and activity where we're going to build something creative and funny, and I want to ask someone from each team, what are you going to build? And I can look and say, okay, it's Lee. I can just circle one person from each team, and I can just go really quickly and call names. So it's helpful to have that list of teams and team members written down, and that's what the team grid is about. But it's just team name and blanks. It's nothing special. You could do it on a blank sheet of paper just as easily. That's the print stuff. The supplies, I list paper and pen, Post-its and Sharpies. In practice, a pen or a pencil is all you really need. I haven't really needed the Post-its or Sharpies or blank paper since I've made some changes to activities. I used to do some drawing and try to film it and show them how to make stuff, but that we've simplified the activities. I think as long as you have a pen or pencil to scribble notes on, you're fine. It doesn't hurt to have the other ones, but there's no expectation that you really need them. Finally, at the bottom, your technical equipment, your computers and cables. It is preferable to have an external webcam and microphone, which I do here. This is an external webcam I'm looking at, and there's my external microphone I'm looking at as well. Not because your laptop doesn't have a webcam or a microphone. It probably does. It may not, but it probably does. The problem is that, first of all, with your webcam, most of the time, especially if you're teaching a class like this, you probably have an external display. But either way, so especially if you have an external display, the laptop is probably over to the side and you're looking at the external display because it's bigger. And so if you're using the webcam on your laptop, it is over to the side and it's probably down. This one's actually elevated. And so you're just getting the side of your face. So you could take your laptop and put it up on a stack of books and put it right in front of you. The problem is you'd be typing like this. But if you had an external keyboard, that would work. Because the webcam's not bad in your laptop. Generally, it's fine. The problem is it's not in the right position. So having an external webcam lets you have, and I'm actually not even sitting in the best position because my seat's a little low. It allows you to kind of be face-to-face with people so that you, when you're looking at the screen, you also can just look right up and see people. The microphone, the advantage of that is if you have a good quality microphone, that really helps because people are going to have to listen to you a lot, so having clear audio is helpful. And if you're using the audio on the microphone on your laptop, and if your laptop is working really hard, which it might be doing, the fans will be blowing. And so you'll get this shh background, and so the sound quality may not be great. And so typically it's nice if you can have an external microphone. I've got a Yeti mic. I think they're about $100, so it's not the cheapest thing in the world. They're really nice if you want to have one, but they're not cheap. Amazon has an Amazon Basics one that I think is not as good, but it's pretty good and it's a lot cheaper. I saw that in Wirecutter recently. So we aren't sending those out to everyone, so you're not required to have them. But I would say if you have access, if you can find an external webcam, if you can find a reasonable headset or a microphone or just a really quiet space to be in, that helps. That does help. Suitable lighting. I have a video, one of the Zoom videos that talks about lighting. I will throw that Zoom video up here. And I'll also talk a little bit about the studio setup, although not so much about lighting there. So good lighting. The big thing is don't have darkness in front of you and a window or bright lights behind you because you'll be in silhouette. That's the biggest thing. Everything else is just incremental things to make it better. It is, again, preferable. It is probably the case that you'll want to have an external monitor if you can. The reason for that is that, as I mentioned earlier, the camera position isn't always great, and what having an external monitor lets you do is have a big screen to look at for your main content, and more importantly, it lets you have a separate screen that shows you what slide is next. So you don't have to look at a script or keep looking to the side to remind yourself what's coming next. You can just glance out of the side of your eye and you can see in your peripheral vision the next picture, which helps make things easier. You don't have to have that. You can have one laptop that has the current slide and you're seeing that and you're just remembering or looking at what's next, and that works. So you don't have to have one, but for me, I'd prefer to have one. Okay. Up next, sorry, my screen just went black, and so that's my distraction there. Your laptop, there's two different roles here we're going to talk about. The assistant, which is the sort of the Zoom host. This is the person, I would say, running back of house. They're making sure technically things are running smoothly, but they're not necessarily on screen to the participants. And then there's the host, and the host is the person sharing the slideshow and doing most of the talking. So for the person who's actually running the house, that's the Zoom host, is making sure the logistics are working. It is preferable for them to be on a company Windows PC, or a company machine, which for us is going to be a Windows PC. The main reason is that the Zoom call that will be used is going to be hosted on the company's Zoom instance, and it will be authenticated using your single sign-on from your company machine. So when you're on your company machine and you log in, it'll say, I know who you are the host. Now you could do that and then log in with another machine and then grant host to that other machine and then log off and do everything from the other machine. That's fine. But if you drop your connection, you might have to go back and do it again. So it's just a little bit cleaner and easier to run the Zoom host and assistant responsibilities from a company machine on the company network, as a rule. And I would typically recommend that you have that hooked up to an external display for the reasons I've said. It just gives you more real estate to manage things instead of having to flip around and look for things. And in general, for whichever role you have, if you can be connected to internet rather than on Wi-Fi, if you can have a hardwired connection, it's going to be that much better. And make sure you're plugged into power. I have run a session before and at lunch wondered why my laptop was complaining because I forgot to plug in power. It does happen, so something to check. Similarly, the presenter. For the presenter, it really doesn't matter what you're doing, like what kind of computer you're using. It can be on the company network or not. It can be Windows, it can be Mac, because all you're basically doing is joining a Zoom call as a participant and sharing your screen. So whatever that screen is. So it is much less important that the presenter be on a company network, company machine, than it is that the Zoom host, the assistant, be on a company machine. That's the thing that matters, the assistant one more. And again, you want to have that connected up to an external display if you can, webcam, external mic, hardwired Ethernet, and power. Okay. The power I would consider mandatory. The rest of it is recommended. The next part I want to talk about is the one with the pretty pictures, or at least the pictures. This is the studio setup. By studio, I just mean wherever you're not projecting from, wherever you are broadcasting from, wherever you are presenting from. It might be at home, it might be in a company office, but it's a place where you can sit and talk at a screen for 4 or 5 hours, and it's not going to bother the people around you too much, and they aren't going to bother you. So I'm calling that the studio. So this is the studio setup, and I've broken it into two parts. The studio setup for the assistant, who's running back of house, as well as the studio setup for the presenter, who's running front of house, who's talking to people. Each of these two sections has, each of these two people, I've got 3 ways of showing the information. And it probably could have been laid out a bit more intuitively, but I'll show you how it's set up. So I've got the picture of the final state, and then the same thing described in words at the top up here. So this is where you're trying to get to, the setup that you want to have. And the last piece, which maybe should even be first down here, is sequence. So this is step by step what I do to get to that configuration. So I kind of put that last. So here's what it should look like. Here's a text description of it. And then here's what you should do, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let me walk you through that both for the assistant because theirs is a bit more complicated. It's first, and then the presenter second. So in order to get to this kind of layout, this part up top is the external display. The part at the bottom is the laptop. That's true for both examples. So here's how I do that. I'm going to read from the back while you can look at the front here a little bit at least. So I've written this using my own technology, which maybe I shouldn't have, but I selfishly was making this for myself initially. So I talk about the external HP display because my external monitor over there is an HP. It could be any external monitor, but it's the external display versus the actual company laptop. So on the external display, on the external monitor, Zoom. It's a combination of two things, the slideshow that's currently being shared, as well as the audience gallery. To be honest, that's more useful for me as a presenter to see because I know that there's lag sometimes. And it's nice to kind of see if I'm playing, for example, a video, and that video might be lagging by 4 or 5 seconds because I've set it up to optimize and play smoothly. And so I finish the video on mine, I look over, I wait, and a few seconds later it ends. So I'd like to be able to see that as a presenter, which again, if you're in different places with the assistant and the host, you wouldn't be able to see that. So part of my setup reflects the fact that I did both jobs. But I like seeing that slideshow there, so I can just take a sanity check and to see the audience, just to sort of see, are they engaged? Does someone look like they have a question? Are they kind of nodding their heads? If I say, give me on a show of hands, what do you say? And I can see people raising hands, etc. So that's how I look at the audience as a presenter. And if I'm in an assistant role, I can kind of look at that as well and see if people seem like they understand or if they look confused, and then maybe that's something I feed back. So I have used the big monitor to kind of look at the audience and look at the presentation. An assistant who's not presenting might choose to change that a little bit, but this is how I've done it. On my laptop are the things that are probably more important for an assistant, but they were kind of my secondary job, so I didn't emphasize them as much. That's where most of my Zoom controls were. So I'm logged into Zoom as the host of the session, so the assistant is the host, not the presenter. The assistant is the host. It says video. I don't know what I meant by that. I guess perhaps I meant, depending on whether the same person is doing both jobs, I don't need to have video on. But I could have the video on if I'm someone separate, so maybe the video is down there. Disable waiting room. You can set this up when you create the Zoom call, but my default is to have a waiting room. That's, I think, our company default, and I don't want a waiting room for this training class. If people come in more than an hour early, the class hasn't started yet, so they can't get in. Once we're live and it's like within an hour of the start, if people want to come in and ask me questions or talk to me, that's fine. And I don't want my assistant to have to keep checking to see if anyone's come in and is waiting. So I turn off the waiting room. So that's part of the job here. I have a text file in Notepad. That's the one that's shown here. And it says notification and links. So I send text notifications. The assistant will send text notifications, for example, saying you have 5 minutes left in this activity. Just so you know, you have attention, you have 5 minutes remaining in this activity. And that gets into the text notification within Zoom. Rather than trying to type these each time, every notification I'm going to send in the class is in a text file, as well as things like URLs for the mural boards. I've got all that stuff in a text file, so if I need it, I can just copy it and paste it into the chat or into notifications for the breakout rooms. And so I have that file open and ready to go. It stays open. Because a lot of times I think, I was supposed to send it. And the fact that I can get to it very fast is helpful to me, has been helpful to me many times. And then finally, the Zoom chat window. So I'm watching chat. And if I'm not presenting, I'd be watching chat more closely, perhaps. And then Outlook, just in case I need to email something to someone, I'd probably just have that minimized. It's not really worth taking up the space. But a lot of those controls of Zoom are down bottom. So what I see, the slideshow and the audience is kind of up top, and then all the controls are down bottom. Notifications, chat, breakout rooms, etc. So all the breakout room controls are down bottom too. So that's the setup for the assistant. What do I actually do as an assistant? With my assistant hat on, here's what I do on the morning when I'm starting the class. First, I'll join into the Zoom call, and I'm the host. And when I get there, I disable the waiting room. And if I'm doing both roles, I'll turn off my audio. Otherwise, I get a feedback loop. Otherwise, it's fine. Then I when the other person or the other computer joins in, I'll make them a co-host so that if I lose my connection, which has happened before, if I lose my Zoom connection, the host doesn't just go to some random person who doesn't know what to do with it. It goes to the person I want. So I make the other facilitator, the presenter, the other people who are on the presenting team, make them a co-host as well. And then I set up my screens at the top with the presented slideshow. So I will have presented the slideshow with the other from the presenter. And so it comes up, I will set my screens up the way I want them to be with the audience gallery view as well as the slideshow. I will log into Mural. In this picture, I've got Mural down bottom. In practice, I can have it there. I can also have it up top, but just have it alt-tabbed behind Zoom, which is probably what I would recommend. Both are fine, but I probably would actually put it in the background, unless you want to be able to use a touch interface of like a Windows machine with touch. So I'll bring that up. I'll log in. I'll get it there. Then I'll just move it to the background. Remember, you have to use Edge or Chrome for that, not Internet Explorer. For chat, I'll go into the Zoom window and I'll click chat, which puts the chat on the side, and then I'll click the button to pop it out, so it's a separate window, and I'll move that down separately so I can position it where I want it. And then I'll go in and create the breakout rooms. Now, a word about breakout rooms. So what I do is create the breakout room. So if I've got 6 teams or 8 teams, I'll create that many breakout rooms. I'll name them based on the class. So if it's named on cities, it's Team Paris, Team Dubai. So I'll create all those names. I will set 2 properties. I'll set one that says move all automatically. That means when I open the breakout room, so there's creating and opening, they're different things. You create the rooms, but they're still closed, and then you open them. I check the box that says when you open them, people go automatically. So move people automatically when the breakout room is opened. So I'll check that box, and I'll change the timing down to 15 seconds for how long to leave people in after it's closed. So when I close a breakout room, they've got 15 seconds, and then they'll get pulled back into the main session. So I set those 2 properties, and then I wait, because the next thing is to put people in, but I can't put the people in to the session yet. I have to wait for them to get into the class. At least the way we do it, we wait for them to get into the class, and then we add them to the rooms based on that team grid that we had set up. Okay, so that is what the assistant does. That's the setup for the assistant. Now, turning the page, let's talk about the presenter. In a way, the presenter has an easier setup because their screens just have, up top is the slideshow that you're presenting. It's what everyone else is seeing. It's what you see too. You share the desktop in front of you. And over on your laptop to the side is the presenter view, current slide, next slide, speaker notes, etc. That's basically all you've got. The 2 exceptions are that there are some Zoom pieces. So the Zoom pieces are the little window that shows when you're presenting. It shows a little film strip of participant videos, your own, as well as some participants. I put that up at the top of up at the very, very top of the screen that I'm looking at, so that when I look at myself or I look at participants, I'm looking towards the camera. So it helps maintain eye contact as opposed to me looking like this all the time. So I put that up at the top. And the controls, like the ability to share or unshare, etc., annotation, chat, all of that goes on the laptop that has the presenter view, next slide, current slide, etc. Because I don't look there a lot. I just glance over there. So if I need to turn, the main reason I use that is both sharing, but I don't usually, I've set up the share. The big thing that I use that for is turning on and off the optimization for video. So anytime I'm going to play a video, I have to go over there and check the box that says optimize for video. Then I hit play, and I have to wait 4 or 5 seconds as it buffers up the video for all the participants, and then it plays smoothly. And then when the video is done, I have to wait a few seconds. When it's done for me, I have to wait a few seconds for it to be done for everyone else. And then I turn it back off. That way, as I go forward, when I talk and I click, or I don't have a clicker, in this case, when I push the button to advance the slide, it happens the same for everybody, rather than 4 or 5 seconds later. So I have to toggle that quite a lot, and that happens on the Zoom controls that are on the laptop. Okay, so that's the setup. So to show that, here's the Zoom controls for sharing and the presenter view. That's down on the laptop. Up top is the slide the slideshow that I'm sharing, the view of the audience, and then also down here it says Mural, Alt Tab. So when I log into Mural, I'm going to say here's our activity, and I'll switch into Mural. I've got that on a browser back behind, and I just Alt Tab, and it brings it to the front. And that's on the main screen that I'm watching. So that's the setup for the presenter. which is what all this is trying to say. I'll run through it quickly in case there's some things worth elaborating. So on the external display, where I want to get to is that I'm sharing the desktop. So I don't share PowerPoint. I don't share Preview or other things. I share the entire desktop, the one that I'm looking at. I always have computer audio checked, but I toggle the optimize for video on or off depending on whether I'm playing a video. When it's done, I'll turn that off, but I'll leave the audio on all the time. I don't start by sharing the slideshow. I actually start by sharing a welcome screen, which is just a picture. It's a picture of the first slide. That way, all my screens aren't taken up with the slideshow running, and I can still fiddle around with things on my other computer while I'm sharing the image from my main computer. So I start with a full screen preview of the welcome slide. The zoom to fit is sometimes you'll do full screen, but it's only taking up part of it rather than the whole thing. And so there's a little checkbox that says zoom to fit, which you can check, which will help with that, I found. And then later I'll present the actual slideshow. I have a note here to consider small screen resolution if it's too large. Judgment call. What I mean by that is I've got a 27-inch monitor that I'm running this on, and people might be watching the presentation on a 13 or 15-inch laptop, which is okay, but it means that what I'm seeing might be very different than what other people are seeing. And I have at least one time tried changing my screen resolution, which I like it to be very small. I like to have a lot of stuff crammed onto a screen, and the things are quite small. But I've changed it to make everything sort of bigger with less real estate so that what I see is a bit more like what other people would see, perhaps. It's not really important. I don't usually do that, but I have done it. So it's a thing to think about. I mentioned the Mural window is there. I've got Mural logged in. I disable notifications. So on Mac, if I get a text message on my phone, it'll show up on my Mac as well. And if I'm sharing the desktop, everyone sees the text messages coming in from my wife or my mom. So I'll turn that off, which is just up in the corner. There's some little dots and lines in the corner of Mac. It depends on the operating system version, but you can turn on Do Not Disturb on your laptop. Similarly, on a Windows machine, you might have Skype or other tools that are sort of communicating to you. You want to put those in a Do Not Disturb mode. And if you're using your browser for Mural in particular, you might have lots of other browser windows. I'll pull off just the window I want to share and either close or minimize the rest of them. So if I'm alt-tabbing around, I make sure that I'm sharing what I want to share and don't get distracted. That's the big window. Then there's also the laptop. On the laptop, that's where the Zoom controls are running, as I mentioned. In this document, I actually mentioned the specifics. So the video is set to Logitech C920. That's my webcam. The audio is set to the Yeti mic. That's my microphone. Whatever equipment you're using, if you write down what those are, you can just double check that you're using the right thing, because occasionally I'll accidentally use the camera from my laptop and I can't understand why the angles are weird. So if you write down the right settings, you can double check those. The presenter view is there. Spotify. So on the company network, on a company machine, you just don't have that. And it's really not important for a virtual call in the way I think it's important in the room, in part because in a physical class, because it takes a lot of effort to physically get into a room, people will often come in quite early because maybe it's convenient, rather than going way off to their desk or their office and then coming all the way back. So you get people showing up an hour early sometimes, or certainly a half hour early. On a video call, because it's so easy to join, there's not a lot of reason to come early unless you want to just talk to someone. And so I find that 5 or 10 minutes or even 5 minutes before, you may have practically no one on the call. So having music there isn't really so important. But if you do want to have it, which I do when I'm presenting, I run that on my Mac, and so I bring up Spotify and I'll start playing the music, and then it's kind of there. If people join early, it kind of just gives a slightly different feel to the average call. But you can't run it on a company laptop. And so if you're presenting from a company laptop, just know that you don't have that, and that's fine. You could play something else in the background if you want to, but it's not going to be played through your laptop. I also mentioned, you should have a copy of the notifications in case you have to take over host duty. So if the person who's running back of house, if they lose their connection, well, you've been made the co-host, hopefully, and so now you become the host, which is okay. That doesn't hurt anything. But it means if it's time to send out the 5-minute notification, and we've written out all those notifications in a text file, if you don't have the text file, now you've got to go and type something up. So if the assistant has a text file with all the notifications, you should have one too, just in case you need it. That's what I mean by that. It wouldn't be terrible if you didn't have it, but it'd just make your life a little bit easier in case you did. Now for the sequencing at the bottom. What do I actually do? I launch Keynote to make sure the deck comes up, everything looks fine. I don't launch the slideshow, just bring up Keynote. And then I join Zoom, and the assistant's already in, they're the host, and and I just join as a participant initially, and then I'm given co-host abilities, which is just there in case they drop off as host. I don't need anything special for what I'm doing. I launch the welcome screen in full screen, that image in full screen, so I can still use my laptop. So on the big screen that I'm sharing in Zoom, I then share that desktop, so I share that image of the welcome screen, so people see that when they come in, but I can still use my laptop for other things. I log into Mural on the main Mural board on my browser, and then I'll just move that into the background so I have it later when I want to. It's just there ready to go. I disable notifications, so I put on Do Not Disturb so nothing interrupts me. And then if I have any other browser windows, I minimize them so that when I Alt-Tab, I don't bring up the wrong window. That's it. Okay, let's motor on. Part 6, readiness check. I explained in far too much detail exactly where all of my lights are and the commands that I use, like voice commands to set everything up. You're not going to use the same ones, but it's just a reminder, like my room lights are on, my various other lights are on, my window is set up. So here's how I do my lighting, so I can just mentally check, is the lighting the way that I expect it to be? So check your lighting. AV check. If you use a Yeti mic, it has a little red light when it's plugged into USB, and if it flashes, that means it's muted. It's muted. And so this is just, I have a line to say, check and see if it's flashing. If so, no one can hear you. So, and then do the audio check. And the way I do the audio check is I will sign into the call, the class Zoom call with my phone, my iPhone. So I'll dial in with my iPhone. I will start the AV check slide in the deck. So I start playing it at what I think is the correct level. And then I'll quickly get out of the room so I don't get feedback, and I'll step outside the room and I'll listen and see if the sound level, with my phone being at a reasonable level, is the sound good? Can I hear everything? Does it sound good? If not, I'll make an adjustment. Yeah, it should be, but maybe not. I've found that on my Mac, at least, the volume of the Mac actually affects what goes through, which I didn't think it would, but it seems to. Then I'll come back in, I'll stop the slideshow, I'll go into Spotify, I'll play the pre-show music nice and quietly, I'll step back out, I'll listen to that. You know, is it at a level where I could still have a conversation over it, but it's still audible in the background? So I'll adjust those. Once I've adjusted those two levels, hang up the phone, and I'm done with the AV check. So that's how I do it both mornings, day 1, day 2. And I mentioned the video check. I just checked that the lighting and the green screen and everything is working properly. Final check is just, you need to go to the bathroom. Do you need to get drink or any snacks? Is there anything printed out that you like, oh, I meant to print that out last night, but I didn't have any paper, so get your printouts in that text notification file because I just forget it sometimes, so make sure you know that it's open and that you have it. Doors open. So doors open. So that some of this I've already mentioned, but this is like doors open mean, okay, it's an hour to go. That's my cutoff. 1 hour before class starts. I've done my AV check. Everything looks ready. Let's go. So I bring up that welcome screen, put it up, and it'll stay up until almost we start the class. So I get that ready, the Zoom to fit and everything. I synchronize the playlist in Spotify. Again, if you're not using Spotify, it doesn't matter. But for me, I'll go into Spotify, I'll look and see how long till the class starts. If the class starts at 8:30, it really starts at 8:35. So if it's 7:30, I've got an hour and 5 minutes of music. So my Spotify playlist is about an hour and 6 minutes. And so if it's an hour and 6 minutes and I've got an hour and 5 to go, I'll hit play and I'll move along 1 minute. The idea is that the last song should end at the time I want things to start. So I'll move that playlist along so that the amount of time left matches. The team grid, I'll go in and look in the mural where everyone put their little Post-its on the tables. If I haven't done this, I could do this the afternoon before. But I'll say, okay, Alice is at table number 1. Bob is at the KL table or whatever. I will pencil in the names. The reason I pencil them in is the way their name is written on the Post-it versus the way their name might show up in Zoom could be different. What I really need to see is how does it show up in Zoom, because we're using this mainly for the breakout rooms. And so if their name is written differently, they have initials or something, I'll write down what I know, but if I was going to do it in pen, I'd do it to match what's in Zoom. Also noting that they might even change it in Zoom. So pencil that in. Look to see if there are any people who were not able to put their Post-its in, but they're signed up for the class. And if so, I might create a post-it for them, but make a little asterisk next to that I don't know if they're coming. Hopefully I've chased them ahead of time, but I may not know. Create the breakout rooms. I mentioned this earlier, those settings, so go ahead and start creating it. And as people are coming in, I'll add them in to those breakout rooms. And again, each breakout room corresponds to a team and a table. And as update the team grid based on the Zoom name. So if someone goes into Zoom and changes their name from Zachary to Zach, then I might update that as well on the team grid so that it matches. So that's the stuff I'm doing over that hour, and probably especially in the 10 or 5 minutes before as people are coming in. And some of this with the breakout room stuff and the team grid, that's probably more assistant role in practice because they're thinking about that and they'll be managing the breakout rooms. Okay. Part 8, during the session. What are you actually doing during the session? Obviously presenting, eyes to the camera, switching over to Mural to show activities. If I haven't mentioned it already, there's an activity video that shows how to do different activities in Mural. For demos, we have the I like, I wish, and the yes and, no but. There's also a birthday order activity, which simply goes something like, my birthday's in August. Hey, assistant, when's your birthday? Your birthday's in that month. Okay, it's November now, so your birthday will be coming before mine, or mine will be coming before yours. So we put the sticky notes in that order. So that's a little back and forth demo that the assistant will be participating in. Managing the Zoom breakout rooms, I've mentioned that earlier. So that's something that, as we're getting started, people might continue to come in. So the assistant will be watching that. The other elements that I didn't necessarily speak to yet are that during certain activities, we'll open the breakout room. It would typically go something like, are there any questions before we open the breakout rooms? Okay, when you get into your breakout rooms, you'll have 15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to open the breakout rooms now. Go. And then you hit open, and everyone is pushed into the breakout rooms. Similarly, when time is up, we'll drop a notification in saying you got a minute to go or time's up, and then hit close, and they have 15 seconds. So that opening and closing of the breakout rooms is a part of the responsibility of the assistant in this case. And other notifications along the way. You're halfway through, 5 minutes left to go, etc. Monitor and support. So this is something that the assistant, again, is likely to do because the presenter will typically be talking, but it might be that someone has a question, and what I typically say is that, as I'm presenting, the assistant will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, if it's something confusing or if I've misstated something, please speak up. But if you just have a question about something, you can drop it into the chat and the assistant will be watching and will try to help you. Also, if there's technical issues, like I'm having trouble with my microphone or something, then those can be handled like offline through the chat. And so the assistant's job is to watch the chat and to help out with that. One thing that is interesting, at the end of this monitor and support section, it says visit breakout rooms when assistance is requested. And it is not clear to me whether it makes more sense for the presenter or the assistant to visit. There's arguments for both. There's also complications with both. If the presenter goes to join a breakout room, what will happen is the slideshow will stop being shared. And so when they come back in, they've got to remember to share their screen again. Otherwise, it'll just be a video call. So they have to reshare it each time. Similarly, if the assistant goes into the breakout room, when they go, the host job will be passed over to the presenter. The presenter will now be the host. And so the presenter will need to send a notification if one needs to be sent, and will need to make sure to give host back to the assistant when they get back. So you have to decide which of those you prefer. There's not one that's obviously better or worse. But be aware that regardless of who goes, there's going to be something you have to do. Either reshare your screen if you're the presenter, or give host back. If the presenter goes, they're going to have to reshare their screen. If the assistant goes, the presenter is going to have to give host back. So, the next section, which is building the gallery, I'll talk about in just a moment, but it is covered in the Mural video about activities in the section called dot voting. And if I've not mentioned that already, it's going to be up here, which is some tips for doing activities in Mural. You'll want to look for the one called dot voting, which is near the end. It's one of the chapters near the end, and it explains how to do that. The one note that is not in that video, though, is the very last item on the list is not covered there, and it says the presenter can't switch out of the slideshow. What the heck does that mean, since you haven't switched and watched that other video? during this, there's going to be an activity that happens while participants are doing a break and while they're doing an activity, so about 25 minutes between the two of those, the assistant and or the presenter will be going and taking screenshots from murals and building a new mural off of those screenshots. The thing to be aware of if you are the presenter and you want to do that is that if you're doing it during the break, there's music running. There's a video, there's a little animated clock, and there's music playing on your slideshow. And if you Alt-Tab out to go over to Mural, it will stop the music and stop the timer. So you've kind of broken the presentation. So you have to use a different computer. So if you have two computers, that's fine. You can use the other one. Otherwise, it might need to fall to the assistant to do that because the presenter is kind of locked into having their screen occupied with showing people both the break, or if you're doing it during the 15-minute activity, people don't see that, but there is a little reminder of notifications. So you could do it during that 15-minute time, but then you have to remember to send your notifications because the thing that would remind you isn't running. Same thing. So that's what I mean. You can't switch out if there's something running on your screen to go do these activities. Okay, last bit and 4 minutes to go. Perfect. Between the sessions. After session 1, before session 2, there's a change you need to make in the deck itself, and there's changes you want to make in the mural boards, multiple changes in the mural board. The deck change. The deck change is that we now have a slide that says, here are your how might we questions from yesterday, because we have time to write them now. And so in the afternoon of the first day, you'll go in and you'll change those how might we questions to match the ones that are in the mural board that they've written down. So that's a pretty easy thing to do, but it's a change to the deck. So that's that one. The second part, day 2 mural preparation. You're going to take the how might we question, not just the how might we question, the whole problem framing, the goal, if it's any different, the how might we question, and the design principles, if they wrote them, sort of the entire brief. From the mural board, you're going to copy that, and you're going to go to the gallery mural and update that with each team's problem framing. So you'll paste it in there one at a time. You'll also go to each team's own team mural, and you'll put the team's problem framing in there, the how might we question, etc. So you'll paste it into each of those. So you'll have 2 copies for each of them, one in the gallery and one in the team's own mural. So that's the first part. The next thing is you'll also take the crazy 8s that were done just at the end of day 1. So you've got a line of like 32, maybe 32 different crazy ideas on little Post-its. You'll copy all those Post-its and you'll go to the team's mural and paste them in there, and then you'll arrange them in a grid. And the video on the remix, there's a video in the activities, and I don't think I can put it up here again, but if you go to the activities mural video, if you go there and you look for the section like 9 or 10 or 11, it's called, actually it's probably like 8 maybe, called the remix. Look for that chapter. In the remix, I show how to take all these Post-it notes and make a mixed grid. So you're going to take that. So just refer to that video for how to do that. But essentially, you want to copy the crazy 8s from the main mural into the team's mural so that they can build new ideas on it. The last part is put people's names in. On day 1, it doesn't have any names. It just says player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, because I don't know who's going to show up. On day 2, I have a pretty good idea of who's going to show up. And to help make things run faster on day 2, which is important because day 2 was already longer, and then you have all these activities and in and out of breakout rooms. So day 2 pace is really important. Day 1, clarity and understanding. Day 2, pace. And so we want to make it easier. And so instead of saying player 1, player 2, player 3, we actually say Bob, Alice. And so you'll go into the team mural. All the names are just in the team mural. You go into each team mural, and where it has player 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll replace that text, player 1, with Alice or Bob. It exists in 3 places. It's over on that outline on the side. It's actually in the mural itself. You have to unhide in the outline. Unfortunately, it's not a area title, so you have to put it in both places. But if you unhide each of them, it says storyboard, like story, player 1. Player 1 becomes Alice. In the outline, player 1 becomes Alice. And there's also one purple Post-it note that says player 1's best idea, Alice's best idea. Bob's best idea. So that when they come into the team mural, it seems inviting. It has their names and they know right where to go because they just go to their names. So that makes it a bit easier. So that's what's done between the sessions. The how might we questions, the crazy eights, and the names are put in the afternoon. The last part is this post-class email. This is basically the same as it's been before. After the class, you're going to send out a notification to all the people. Under notification, you'll send out an email with the takeaways and surveys. And again, this doesn't really change. This is the same as we've done in the physical class. We do it in the virtual class. And with that, we've hit just about bang on an hour. Thank you. Apologize for it being very quickly done, because I've got to go do something with the kids. But I hope this is helpful in you understanding the production plan. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Take care and best of luck. Bye-bye.